I could already feel the weight of something strange brewing, but I brushed it off. Chuy, the kid with the shaggy champagne-colored hair and the sleepy, almost lazy eyes, had always been a bit of an enigma. He was the kind of person who carried a warmth, a kind of gentle ease that made you want to be around him. I still remember the first time he looked at me and introduced himself, his hand, soft as velvet, extended toward mine. And yet, beneath that charm, I had no idea that he was hiding something. At first, things seemed perfect. Chuy wasn't just a good kid, he was spectacular. His tie-dye shirts, his John Lennon sunglasses, his obsession with Michael Jackson, everything about him was bright and carefree. I couldn't help but feel like I hit the jackpot. He was a teenage foster kid, the hardest kind to take in, but he'd proved every expectation wrong. He aced his school projects, made friends easily, and even spent his free time helping out at a homeless shelter. What else could I ask for? But then, one evening, I walked by Chuy's room. I didn't think much of the sounds at first, the giggling, the whispering, but then I caught a scent, familiar and thick in the air. It stopped me in my tracks. Something was off. I peeked into his room, only to find both Chuy and his friend Aisha, their faces blank but their eyes wide with something I couldn't place. They were holding something in their mouths, their eyes not meeting mine. My gut twisted. "Is everything okay?" I asked. Chuy, trying to be cool about it, exhaled deeply. A thick cloud of smoke rolled from his lips. "Relax, it's legal here," he said with a grin, "just don't tell anyone." I nodded, trying to ignore the flutter of unease. I should have known then. I told them to keep it low-key, no driving or going out, and then I went back to my room. But later, when the night was thick and quiet, I heard them again. This time, something was different. Something was wrong. I made my way downstairs, the sound of their muffled laughter echoing in the hallway. I figured they were just hungry, riding out the effects of whatever they'd smoked. So, I made my way to the kitchen to show them where the snacks were. But then, as I got closer to the kitchen door, I overheard something. Something that froze the blood in my veins. "Have you spoken to him lately?" Aisha asked, her voice tense. "It's been a century since I last spoke to him," Chuy replied, his voice hollow, almost mournful. "But he knows where I am. Or, he will soon enough." I froze, standing just behind the kitchen wall, trying to breathe as quietly as I could. "What do you mean?" Aisha's voice was soft, like she was coaxing him to keep going. "If everything goes according to plan," Chuy continued, "I'll only need to speak to him one more time, and then it'll be over. Forever." His words hung in the air like a chill. "And then, I'll have everything I need." I didn't understand, but I could feel something dark creeping into the edges of their conversation. I felt a tightening in my chest, an alarm bell ringing in the back of my mind. What were they talking about? Chuy sounded almost apologetic now. "I feel bad for using him, you know? I feel like it's wrong." Aisha scoffed. "Stop it, Chuy. You're literally the most selfless soul on the planet. It's okay to take care of your own needs, just once." I couldn't make sense of it. "What is this about?" I whispered to myself. I quietly retreated back to my room, my heart pounding. I had to figure this out. Something was wrong. No, something was wrong with Chuy. The kid I thought I knew was slipping through my fingers, and I had no idea what he was becoming. I tried to shake off the unease that had been creeping up on me, but the strange events couldn't be ignored. The vandalized car, the stolen identity, it was as if my life had been slowly unraveling, thread by thread. But nothing prepared me for the way things escalated. I was getting sicker by the day. Pneumonia had settled in with a vengeance, and no matter what the doctors prescribed, it only seemed to get worse. I could barely catch my breath, and the fever was a constant, suffocating weight. Every day, it felt like my world was closing in. And Chuy, the kid I thought I knew, was starting to look more and more like a stranger. It was one evening, as I hacked into a napkin, coughing up blood, that Chuy confessed something that sent a cold chill down my spine. "It's all my fault," he said, his voice barely a whisper, his shoulders hunched with guilt. "What do you mean?" I replied, confused and exhausted. "This isn't your fault, Chuy." But his words cut through the fog of my sickness. "It's my fault," he repeated, his eyes haunted. "I know who's doing this. It's my father. He's doing this to punish me." My father? The words didn't make sense at first. I could barely focus, my mind clouded by fever and confusion. Chuy, though, seemed to be more composed than ever. "Christmas is coming soon," he said, his voice serious. "On Christmas, we'll tell the truth. I picked you, Mija. I chose you because I know what a good person you are. You've always been selfless, always willing to help others. You didn't deserve all this misery, but it's happening because he knows I'm here with you." I felt a deep unease, but I didn't know how to respond. His words were jumbled, like pieces of a puzzle that didn't quite fit. Chuy continued, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. "He's stronger than I am. And now, I need your help." I looked at him, lost. "Help? With what? Who is your father?" His gaze dropped to his hands, and he mumbled, "You won't believe me until you see it for yourself. I'm going to take you to him." I was too tired to argue, too sick to comprehend fully what he was saying. But somehow, I found myself agreeing. I had no choice. Chuy drove us out, an hour away to a secluded beach, the ocean waves crashing against the shore. The pneumonia made everything feel distant, like I was walking through fog. I didn't even question it when Chuy said, "We're going to meet my father." I barely had the strength to ask if we could stop for medicine. Then, I saw him. The man who approached us wasn't just any man. He was a giant, a massive figure, towering over both of us. His muscles were like mountains, rippling under skin that gleamed with a slick, almost oily sheen. He was dressed in tight black swim trunks that only highlighted his immense size. He looked like he could crush anything in his path with a single swipe. As he drew closer, the air seemed to shift. His presence was overpowering, a dark energy radiating off him. "Hello, Father," Chuy said, his voice filled with something I couldn't place. Respect? Fear? I didn't know. I couldn't believe it. This giant was Chuy's father? The same kid who had been my foster son. The boy with the shaggy hair and sleepy eyes? This hulking figure, his shadow stretching across the sand like an omen, was his father? The man grinned, his teeth too perfect, his voice rough like gravel. "It's been a while. I see you brought a friend." I felt small. So small. My voice barely worked as I managed a "Wika" high before coughing violently, the pain shooting through my chest. His father barely glanced at me, dismissing me completely. "So, you're looking for a new father now, huh? After everything you've done to him?" He laughed then, a deep, booming laugh that seemed to shake the very ground beneath us. "I see you don't remember what happened last time you had a human father," he said with a grin. The words hit me like a slap in the face. Human father? What did that mean? I couldn't make sense of it. The air around us seemed thick with tension, and I realized I was standing at the edge of something I couldn't understand. Something dark. The situation was slipping further into madness, and I couldn't keep up. Chuy's father, this towering figure, just casually admitted to being God, as if it was the most normal thing in the world. I couldn't breathe. I could barely comprehend what was happening, especially when he said it like he was describing the weather. "You've been his father for 6 months?" he asked, suddenly looking at me, his voice heavy with disdain. "I've been doing this for thousands of years, and he's still a giant puzzle to me." I sat there, struggling to hold back more coughs, feeling the weight of this revelation suffocating me. Thousands of years? Wow, I muttered, trying to play it cool, but my mind was spinning. Well, it's been going great with him. I mean, I don't know how he ended up in foster care, but it's been good. Chuy's father wasn't impressed. "You don't know the half of it," he sneered. "This kid, he's made a whole book of lies in my name." "A book?" I blinked, confused. What do you mean? You're really clueless, he snapped, laughing bitterly. There's a book about me, the highest-selling book worldwide. You should read it. But only the first buyer can. He paused, and his eyes narrowed. You people are truly clueless. I didn't know if he was mocking me or what. I glanced over at Chuy, who was blinking rapidly, sweat dripping down his forehead. Chuy's father wasn't finished yet. His words felt like thunder. I made man. I made the skies, the oceans, the animals, the stars. I even made your mama, he said, his voice booming, making me shudder. I made everything. And all I asked in return was for you, smart creation, to worship and adore your creator. Then, it hit me, the weight of his words. He was saying he was God. My mind refused to accept it, but he was dead serious. I let out a nervous laugh, but it was cut short as I suddenly began coughing, the pain in my chest returning. Watch this, he growled, his voice ominous. Before I could respond, he reached out, his hand pressing against my chest. I fell to the ground in shock. Wait, hey! I started to protest, but the moment the pressure of his hand touched me, something changed. The pain in my chest, gone. The scratchy feeling in my throat, gone. The cold chills, the pounding headache, all vanished in an instant. I gasped, my breath coming easier. What had just happened? How did you? I stammered, looking from him to Chuy and back again. I'm God, he repeated, a smirk tugging at the corner of his lips. I stared at Chuy, completely stunned. He shrugged casually, as if this was all just another day. Nada de nullis enim, he muttered under his breath. And then, as if this couldn't get weirder, Chuy's father made another declaration that left my mind reeling. Here's what we're gonna do, he said, his voice full of command. My son here will come with me, and in exchange, I will spare your life. I'll give you back your house, your car, your job, all the things I took, because frankly, I got a little jealous watching you two get along. I'm not coming with you, Chuy finally spoke up, his voice firm. His face looked so serious. Wait, if you're God, does that mean you're my? Chuy turned to me, his eyes full of something I couldn't place. The pieces suddenly clicked into place, and I realized, with horror, what he was saying. Yeah, Chuy finished, his voice steady. My name's Chuy, which is short for Jesus in Spanish. I froze. Jesus? The boy I'd been fostering, Jesus? The quirks I'd thought were just eccentricities, his kindness, his intelligence, his skills with carpentry, his ability to turn water into wine, it all made sense now. But what didn't make sense was why I was caught up in this madness. I stood there in utter disbelief as Chuy's father continued his tirade. The weight of his words pressed down on me, making it hard to breathe. I could barely wrap my mind around what was happening. Jesus, Chuy, this giant of a man claiming to be God, it all felt like some surreal nightmare I couldn't wake up from. You're impressed now, huh? God suddenly exclaimed, his voice full of mockery. I tell you I'm God, I cure your pneumonia, and now you're all speechless. But when it's this guy being Jesus, you're impressed. I didn't know how to respond. My mind was in chaos, trying to process everything. God slammed his massive fists on the ground, causing the earth beneath us to vibrate. This is why I detest humans, he muttered, shaking his head. They worship anything. Elvis, the Kardashians, even the internet. I sent my son Jesus to spread my word, and what happens? You all make up a whole new religion. And then they have the audacity to give it the biggest holiday on earth. Paganism everywhere. Jesus looked hurt by his father's words. I was only trying to help, he said, voice trembling with indignation. Help? God repeated mockingly. You think it helped me when you claimed all sins would be forgiven if people just repented? Do you think it helped me when you said anyone could make it into heaven as long as they claim my name on their deathbed? He paused, looking at Jesus with contempt. You didn't help. You made all of that up. You made a mockery of my regime, and your incompetent forgiving ways have gotten us nowhere. Jesus didn't back down. What was I supposed to do? He snapped. What was I supposed to do? Just stand by and let you punish every tiny mistake, every small action you consider a sin? God's voice grew colder. This is my universe, and I am its God. Only I can decide what's a sin. Only I get to decide what's good and what's evil. He turned toward me, his gaze intense. And you? You shouldn't worship me. Not if you want to end up living inside a marble. I blinked, confused. What do you mean? Jesus looked at me, his face solemn. He keeps all the souls inside little marbles, he explained. He counts them, knows exactly how many he owns. Inside the marbles, he gives them the illusion of eternal bliss, which is really just stale Boston cream donuts and room temperature soda, along with reruns of Gilligan's Island. He shook his head in disgust. I was speechless, more terrified than ever. That's heaven? I asked in a whisper. God scoffed. Oh, my God, I muttered, horrified. Don't use my name in vain, he warned, a sharp edge to his voice. And don't apologize to a murderer, Jesus interrupted. Do you know what it was like? Being tortured? Being nailed to a cross? Carrying that thing for miles, the very device that would murder you? His voice cracked with raw emotion. The physical agony was bad enough, but worse than that, he made me carry the weight of all human sin. It's the heaviest burden anyone could bear. And the trauma still haunts me today. God just laughed. I stopped caring 2,000 years ago when you started spreading lies. Let me be clear, he continued, his tone growing colder and darker, I don't forgive. Ever. I feel no guilt. I have no remorse for anything I've done. I made Abraham sacrifice his son. I ordered the deaths of children in Egypt. I drowned every living human on earth except Noah and his family. And I feel no guilt about it. I stood there, horrified and paralyzed, as God continued to reveal the depth of his cruelty, making it clear that, according to him, he was above everything, even morality. His words made the world seem so much darker than it had ever seemed before. I felt like I was caught in the middle of an impossible drama, with emotions, truths, and betrayals clashing all around me. God's thunderous rage still echoed in my mind, his relentless need to control everything and everyone. And then, Jesus, his voice firm and filled with an unwavering resolve, declared the truth I could hardly believe. I no longer love you. I no longer adore you. I no longer worship you, he said to his Father. I love me, a true good soul, and I'm here to say goodbye. As those words sank in, the atmosphere around me seemed to crack and fracture. I'd heard of God's fury, but now I was witnessing it firsthand. God's reaction to his son's declaration was immediate and violent. Jesus' words had struck something deep inside of him, and suddenly, God erupted in a blinding flash of light. The world seemed to shatter around me, and I felt as though I was being pulled into the depths of a terrifying void. The pain, loneliness, and suffering that flooded me were beyond description. It was as if the very essence of everything painful in existence was crashing down upon me. I wanted to disappear into that darkness, to cease to exist entirely, but I couldn't escape. And then, just as everything seemed unbearable, I was surrounded by silence, my screams echoing around me, until I finally drifted into unconsciousness. When I woke up, I wasn't sure where I was. A man sat by my bedside, holding my hand. His presence felt familiar, though I couldn't immediately place him. He was slim, with shaggy champagne-colored hair reaching down to his elbows. Do you remember me? He asked gently, a soft smile playing on his lips. Jesus of Nazareth. I blinked, realizing who he was, and felt a strange sense of safety return to me. Where are we? I asked, my voice shaky. Looking around, I noticed the room's red walls and furniture, a strange and unnerving setting. Don't be scared, Jesus reassured me, noticing my fear. We're in a place called Heaven's Bella. But don't be fooled by the name, it's not heaven. It's actually the headquarters for Hellsing Cotter. We're in the home of Lucifer. I froze, fear washing over me. Lucifer? I whispered, panic rising in my chest. Jesus noticed my reaction and quickly explained. No, it's not what you think. It was on purpose. Let me explain, he said. I've been trying to get here for thousands of years, even before my first arrival on Earth. But you can't just enter. You have to be cast here by God. Only He decides who comes here. I had to figure out a way to get here, and my friend Tia helped me come up with a plan. We made my father jealous enough so that he'd finally cast me into hell. My mind raced. Tia? I asked, struggling to connect the dots. Tia Cranston? Your best friend from school? Yes, Jesus nodded. Tia Cranston. You might know her better as Duranda Graham Naima. She is the daughter of Lucifer. The realization hit me like a ton of bricks. The intricacies of this cosmic battle, the alliances, and the betrayals, they were all far more complicated than I could ever have imagined. Jesus, now here with me in the realm of Lucifer, had found a way to break free from his father's oppressive grip, but at what cost? And what would this mean for the future of this strange, twisted world they were all fighting to control? I sat there, processing the whirlwind of revelations Jesus had just laid out for me. Tia, the daughter of Lucifer, the Antichrist, was now not only a key player in his life but also the one who had helped orchestrate his path to the underworld. It was so much to digest. And to think, God had been using him all this time, as a tool in his jealousy-driven war against Lucifer. Jesus had made his choice. He had broken free from the chains of his father, even if it meant being cast into hell, and now he was determined to make a difference here. Look, he continued, you have to understand, God has only used me. I already realized it after getting back from Earth the first time, and Tia was there for me. We fell in love, but as much as I tried to convince my father to accept our relationship, he opposed it because he's a jealous God. He's always been jealous of his greatest creation, Lucifer. So, of course, I wasn't allowed to date his daughter, and of course, he gave her the title of the Antichrist. I sat up, feeling the weight of everything Jesus had said. I can't judge you, I replied quietly. God is very unpleasant. Yeah, Jesus said with a sigh, a touch of frustration in his voice. I hope you can understand my choices. And as for you, there's no need to worry about getting back home. There's a portal here to Earth in the town hall, but it's going through some technical difficulties right now. They should have it up and running soon, and you'll be able to go home. I nodded, but a nagging feeling remained. What about you? Where will you go? Jesus' face softened as he answered, well, Lucifer has been kind enough to give me an office and a home here in Evansville. Turns out, I have a lot of angel buddies living here too. After their insubordination, God cast millions of angels to help Lucifer, and we've created a little heaven neighborhood within hell, full of fallen angels. It's different, but I think it has potential. Some of the demons seem indifferent, but others are more open-minded. Even Lucifer himself isn't such a bad guy. There's a ton of room for improvement, and I think I'm just the guy for the job. I stared at him, incredulous. Wow, I replied, still trying to make sense of it all. That's a complete change of dynamic. Jesus laughed, his eyes sparkling with mischief. I know, right? I think I'm going to use Jesus of Nazareth and Demon of Bethlehem as my new title. He slapped his knee, chuckling to himself, before looking at me with a grin. I love that. I think I'm going to use that on someone. Before I could respond, there was a knock at the door. A figure slowly opened it, revealing a human body with the head of a goat. The portal is ready, the figure said. Here it is, he said, and without another word, the portal shimmered into existence behind him. Time for you to go home, he added. I turned to Jesus, still overwhelmed by everything that had just happened. This was a world far beyond anything I had ever imagined, and yet, somehow, it felt like a strange new reality. The portal was there, my ticket back to Earth, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was leaving something behind, a part of this incredible, mind-bending journey. As I stepped toward the portal, I took one last glance at Jesus, who stood with an expression of quiet determination. He had made his choices. He was going to try to change the world here, in hell, surrounded by fallen angels and demons. I didn't know if he could, but somehow, I believed he would try. With a deep breath, I stepped through the portal, unsure of what awaited me on the other side.